This is Hospitality 1-to-1, conversations on the industry. Here's your host, Chris Bettis.
Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
You're quite welcome. You know, I have to, say, when I saw the title of your website, I thought of myself, the emotionally intelligent recruiter. Anyway.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you.
Because the good news is everybody has emotional intelligence. So the fact that you're saying that you can see yourself in that, it's like, good. That's great.
Absolutely.
Everyone has emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. So I wanted to, we've got a lot to talk about today because your background is quite wide-ranging and you kind of cover a number of disciplines. But I wanted to I guess, first start with the basics. Tell me your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Ooh, basics in a nutshell. So I'm 46 now, and I spent the first part of my life in education, and I gravitated very significantly towards HR as well as PR, branding, and basically human development. And those four things were very interesting to me in the business environment. And I gravitated towards the dark side, which was to work in PR, working for Sony and Virgin and various companies in the 90s. And I thought, this is it. This is the life. This is what I want to do. And I'd even tried a stint in my teens in the hotel industry and to see whether or not that was right for me, because apparently I had the right personality for it. And I was like, nah, it's a bit repetitious for me. This isn't what I want. I like every single day to be completely different. But, and that's what you use your teens for. Yeah. So during that decade, in my 20s, I came to the realization that whilst products such as the Sony PlayStation and the games that are associated with them are so much fun to publicize and to create brand stories for, what wasn't feeding me and what I was completely dissatisfied about was actually the whole aspect of the human condition. People behind the product, people behind making the company work, making everything to be a success. So I took a really long detour in between relocating countries and launching international websites and doing all sorts of things in that kind of digital space, because I'm hugely passionate about that space. And I came to the realization that this is just taking too long, but it was a great thing because through all of those experiences, it made me more and more focused on being able to become a headhunter and to be able to create a platform specifically for recruiters to enable them to be emotionally intelligent. Or should I say more emotionally intelligent, and to use their emotional intelligence more greatly. But that journey itself has taken the best part of 10 years of my life just to this particular point. And that came from becoming a headhunter, working and doing some amazing international work specifically for organizations. You'll have heard of them, Microsoft, not so popular or known organizations in the .com kind of environment and the mobile environment. And again, I found myself hitting myself against a brick wall, which was this doesn't feel right. What is wrong? And it was really the transactional approach towards recruiting, towards headhunting with the clients, with the candidates, for the candidates, for the clients. And that's where I created Forward, which is a white glove service headhunting company specifically for innovation leaders, whereby the candidates are treated with the greatest respect. Once they're placed as well, on top of that, they then receive first 100 days coaching. So that was one area of business. And then the other area of business was because I wasn't even happy with that. I wanted to go further and say, okay, how can I help society? And my greatest wish over the past 25 years was to help recruiters adapt their emotional intelligence. But it wasn't called emotional intelligence back in the 90s. It wasn't called emotional intelligence so much unless you read books from Daniel Goleman specifically about emotional intelligence, which was a New York Times bestseller in the early 2000s. And then you would have had to have probably been, in organizational leadership or or industrial organizational the kind of levels in large organizations to really take advantage of that. And then it would only be used for the C-suite. But now emotional intelligence is so significantly important. And as a qualified individual, I want to move everyone in the recruitment phase forward because the technology and the digital revolution is constantly evolving. And that means that whilst that takes a lot of the transactional aspects, we need to be more human to our clients, to our candidates, and of course to the colleagues that we work with.
You talk about being more human, and I want to delve into that for a second because you've kind of talked around the idea of a transactional approach. Walk that back for a minute. When you say transactional, what do you mean by that?
I'll give you an example. I think that might be the best thing, and any recruiter can completely understand this, is that I was on the phone earlier this morning with a candidate, a VP level candidate for a very large Fortune 100 organization, and she's an alpha female, and she said, "I'm sure you really want to get this sorted out really quickly and make this placement, but I've got this thing, and if that isn't a deal breaker for you, I really want to think about it." And I said, "It's important that you think about it. I don't want any of this to be rushed. For the candidate, you've got to think about it. You have to identify whether or not this is the right move for you, whether or not this is going to be the right long-term move for you, because your career trajectory is going to CEO. This is hugely important. And then with the client, this product is hugely important for them because it powers so many industries. So, there is no rush. It's all about finding the right fit. And too often, as recruiters, we get pressure from everyone on the, from the candidate because they really want to get that role because, maybe they haven't paid their mortgage or their rent or they're struggling for whatever reasons. And you need to be able to understand in the moment what challenges they might be facing and to be sympathetic and understanding that, if they're rushing, well, be frank and communicate with them directly about, well, unfortunately, this is going to take a little bit longer. And then they can make the decision, okay, maybe they need to look for another role elsewhere so they can meet their particular needs. And then with the organization, it's the same kind of thing. You can't rush. And this is what happens with a lot of recruiters. They will want to put pressure on a client because they have pressure. So the commonality here is pressure. And that creates a more transactional approach whereby everybody wants to move very quickly. And sometimes, more than sometimes, you need to be able to take that beat and to be able to go, okay, what is really going on here? What is happening with the organization? And you have to put on your problem-solving hat, which when you're in a very stressful situation, you don't really feel like you want to create a problem. You just want to, solve it right there and then. And that's the important aspect about emotional intelligence, where you're using all of those different aspects. And I can read them off to you. I'm just going to bring this over to you so you can see it. There we go. Yeah, the emotional and social functioning is all about self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, such as interpersonal relationships, empathy, social responsibility, decision-making, which includes problem-solving and reality testing. So if you think about just the conversation I had this morning, I had to work on what is the reality here? Okay, so I can have a conversation with the client and the candidate in a way that is serving them. And then there's obviously stress management, which is, in recruitment terms, this is probably the heaviest of loads.
So, I guess, why do you think stress is such a high factor in recruiting? Aside from the normal day-to-day job, what's the stress factor? Why is it so high, you think?
I see it everywhere. Whenever I see recruiters, they're in this. And I remember being in that situation myself, which is why I decided to become a coach and decided to become an EQ certified practitioner and wanted to help other people. And the reality is the pressure, as I alluded to earlier, is so great from all different areas. And as one friend so politely said to me one time when I was particularly stressed out drinking a glass of wine many, many years ago, she said, well, yeah, I can understand that. You have you eat what you kill, and which is if you look at and the animal kingdom, that and put it into the recruiter mentality, if a recruiter is only working on commission, that in itself, unless you are making huge commissions where it doesn't matter, then quite frankly, you're relying on $500, $250 tidbits that come down the pipe. Other areas of stress include the relationships that you might have with the client. The client could be screaming at you, and the client could be a hiring manager. The client could be your boss within a recruiting company, or your client could be the person the external client that you report to, who is the hiring manager, and they're in a deep situation. I remember there was one time I was working with a client, and somebody was about to decline an offer based on the salary. And so we had a discussion, and we turned it round, which I think was a miracle for everybody, including the person. And it was one of those things whereby the person, the client, when he was talking to me, he said, if this person doesn't get the job, doesn't accept, we're in a dire situation, because we need this person to start in January. If this person doesn't start in January, we've got some serious revenue issues, and that is going to be our problem. And even I might need to start looking for a job. So when you think about everyone's baseline is they need to survive. And if everybody's living on, we've got to survive, that's a very, 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 very stressful environment.
Now, let's look at this as well, because you've got a lot of focus when it comes to from the recruiter side point. Well, I want to talk more about that in a moment. But let's also look at it because it is a relationship, all right? And to those who, it is different, obviously, if you work with a corporate recruiter from from a Microsoft or from one of those companies. But it's an entirely different animal altogether if you work with a headhunter, for example. So, kind of give me an idea, what is the best practice? So, how should a candidate, what's expected of a good candidate when it comes to working with a recruiter?
So if I understand your question correctly, you want to know what is expected from a candidate if you're working with a good recruiter?
So in other words, so I'll put it this way to you. When it comes to, we have expectations for candidates have expectations of recruiters. What's a good expectation a recruiter can expect from a candidate?
What behaviors would you expect from a candidate? That's really tough. Because there's this delightful vicious cycle that goes on, whereby you just have to look at Google and type in recruiters are, and you get quite a colorful response on what people think about recruiters. So there is this self-fulfilling prophecy going on, whereby because recruiters are so stressed out, and maybe they don't give the white glove treatment to candidates in return will basically treat recruiters in a less than respectful way, and that just creates this terrible vicious cycle that is quite dire. And I want that cycle to stop by starting from the very beginning, which is having recruiters step their game up. Think about what they want to be, how they want to be, because they've got to think about their future career as well, and also how they can be successful, which means, drawing from various leadership practices, and to be able to say from the outset, this is how I am, this is how I behave, this is how I work with candidates. Candidates will actually do their due diligence with recruiters. And when they do their due diligence and they read on their LinkedIn profile, they're able to read in between the lines on what that recruiter is like. So, and I have had candidates research me as well, and they say, okay, I've watched your video. I know what you're about. I will have a conversation with you. People will check me out before having a conversation and taking up their time. So from a candidate perspective, I would like to see candidates do a number of things. The first thing is, when they're applying for a job, is to really understand that they are or are not compatible with the role. And that means doing due diligence, because what happens is, the problem that arises, and we all know this, is that candidates will apply for a role, and when they apply for a role and they're not compatible, they wonder why they don't get any feedback. And the reason why they don't get any feedback is because 1,000 people have just applied for that job, and 998 are incompatible and aren't legally allowed to work in that particular place, or whatever, or they just don't have the qualifications because they think, oh, I've got to try. And candidates will just, unfortunately, mindlessly apply for jobs because they're in that state of stress. So one of the things I do is, and I have somebody specifically to do this, which is when, on the rare occasion that we actually advertise a role, we will have, we will get back to every single one. And it may be a standard message, but it will be quite quick. So they know that they are not being called to interview because their experiences are not compatible with this particular role. One extra step that I'm going to be doing, actually, which has just come up as I think about it now, is to send them a link to send that candidate a link to an article that I've written that specifically says, hey, candidates, this is what you need to do to approach, a role. So I think you can provide that kind of service. If somebody has taken the time to reach out to a recruiter, then the least you can do, even though everyone is really, really stressed out, is to be able to get back. And I think my top tip is if you're in a recruitment company, or is to have somebody on a Friday afternoon, for 2 hours or 1 hour or 30 minutes, get back with a blanket email with this communication. Sorry, you're not being called because we're looking for somebody with this experience. Mm-hmm. And then they're able to say, oh, I don't have that experience, penny drops. And then you can forward that to them. That is just a small service that can be done. I think that would help, educate candidates on what's happening, because too often, and I hear this from candidates even now, intelligent candidates, oh, if something comes across your desk, could you keep me in mind? And I'm thinking, it's not quite how it works. If I've got something that comes across my desk, it's going to be for a unicorn, for starters. And it's great that you're interested, but we don't have, hundreds of roles to be able to review. If, for example, we were in hospitality and we said, okay, we know that we're going to have 10 bartender positions open every single day, that's a different situation entirely, because that's going to be a really, really hard, fast turnover. But, in general, they're unicorn positions. So I think that's step one, which is create a solid brand for yourself so people understand what to expect from you. I know one HR person, for example, that will say, please do not reach out to me if I do not know you. I will not accept your LinkedIn connection request unless I know you. And that, I think, is a little bit harsh. And I don't think it does her or her company any, it does not create the right human kind of focused environment that HR should be doing. But, she's very clear. She obviously has, hundreds of people approach her every single day. And maybe she's been, sexually harassed on LinkedIn as well. Who knows? So I think, so that's step one, that, that you can actually manage how candidates approach you by setting out very clear boundaries and expectations on your LinkedIn profile, on your bio page, on your website, how you communicate with people so candidates will then, communicate with you in the right way. And also when you have that first discussion with them, explaining to them from the outset, this is how it's going to work. And by the way, I'm unable to give you any feedback because it's with regards to a client, for example, they may say, we don't give feedback. And you can say, I want to give you heads up right now. They won't give you feedback. So, and whatever, it's giving candidates as much information as possible. So the candidate is able to respond in a communicative and transparent, collaborative way as well. And I think, good behavior begets good behavior in that particular scenario. So that's what I would recommend.
So we've talked a lot about the candidates and recruiters. Mm-hmm. That leaves us with one final area. That's the clients. And obviously for you to take on an assignment with a client, for you to offer to help fill a position for them, what expectations do you have for them?
I have really high expectations from my clients. I have to admit, and they know that because I have very high expectations in general. And it's about making it really clear from the outset before you guys put a standard contract together is you're going to be having a pitching conversation, which is going to be along the lines of, this is what we do, this is how we do it. Now, clients only want to hear you can get the person that they want, or the people that you want, or, you're able to do a hiring campaign of, 10 people or whatever. And that takes trust. So assuming you've got that level of trust, you've got that level of, you've got that brand in the marketplace whereby your company, ABC, is renowned for hiring, the best and the best and the best. You've already got that launch platform to be able to say, we do this because we have these high standards, and this is what we do. This is what we need from you. This is our cycle. This is our communication cycle. And right from the very beginning, I've been doing that with clients who did not know me, that called me out of the blue because they had received a referral or because they thought that they might want to work with me. And it's a great way to actually sort the clients that you're going to be happy working with. And I'll say to them, there's going to be hard work here. It's not just a case of me sending you resumes or CVs. Because when somebody says, oh, just send me CVs or resumes, I just say, I don't think we're the right company for you. This is how we operate. And we go our separate ways. And that's fine, because there's nothing more stressful. If we go back to the stress management aspect, if there's nothing more stressful than working with a client that is incompatible or not understanding of the way that you want to work, the values that you work to. And sometimes you have to kind of cut corners. Like if you really want to work with, let's say Amazon. I would love to work with Amazon. Amazon don't hire external recruiters. If they did, I would probably have the most difficult conversation with them about the standards that we work with. And that's fine. But I would at least hopefully plant the seed of, if they said, no, this is how we like to operate, and I said to them, well, no, this is, unless it's going to provide more value to X, Y, and Z, then I don't think this is going to work out, which would cause me extreme pain. But at the same time, I know the long-term pain that it would cause, and it really is a case of being selective. So being selective is really crucial here, because a company is formed based on the belief that you can do something differently, or how you bring your business to market, and how you brand yourself, and thinking about your values and what you want to achieve and how you achieve it is really, really important. And that needs to be communicated with companies, that potential companies that want to hire your organization. You've got to think about it. You've got to communicate from the outset, so everybody's expectations are managed. I think that's the secret sauce here. Manage everyone's expectations from the very beginning, and which is a really hard thing to do, because you've got that whole stress thing happening. But once you have that locked down and it becomes part of who you are, you're going to have a happier team. They're going to be more productive. They're going to work with their people, with the candidates, so much more effortlessly, if that is even something that can be considered effortless in recruiting. But it's going to be easier. It's going to be less of a struggle. It's going to be more of a collaboration, and everybody likes working collaboratively. They don't like it to be a fight, and that's what I would recommend.
Well, I wanted to take a detour if we can. We've had a great conversation talking about the practical recruiting, if you will. Mm-hmm. But you actually have a number of areas that you are trying to help recruiters, help the industries in general. Wanted to first ask you, kind of talk about the podcast. What do you have on your podcast?
So the Emotionally Intelligent Recruiter podcast was born in my mind about 2 years ago, because I really wanted to help people become more audacious, more awesome, more brilliant. We're all recruiters, and we think we do a great job. But the one thing that we're kind of put on the shelf and forgotten about is leadership development as recruiters. Recruiters always get the training to learn the new software platform or the new tool, the new search system, the new social media application, the new the new search or whatever, it's always technology related. What we forget, or what everyone seems to forget in human resources and in leadership, especially with CEOs, is that, heck, your recruiters are actually working with the humans that you want to power your company. What about teaching and helping recruiters adapt and learn and grow and develop their leadership thinking? So that's where it came from. And I've been interviewing fantastic people like Marshall Goldsmith, Dory Clark, Warren Berger, who wrote the book called A More Beautiful Question, which, at the end of the day, we are recruiters and we go out and we have to ask questions to get to the bottom of things. And it's turning everything on its head. And there are so many resources out there, but the lens that I come through with the Emotionally Intelligent Recruiter is specifically for recruiters, so they can understand that this podcast, this learning attitude, this learning lens is specifically for them. Now, the reality is anybody can listen to this, but there are always going to be certain aspects within each podcast that relates to, well, recruiters, think about how you can think about this differently, how you can integrate this particular idea into your daily practice, your daily routine. And it's been a blast. I mean, I've only launched 31, I think, podcast episodes so far, and I've got a backlog of about 10 to process right now. And I have to say, I see this just going on and on and on, because there's so much to learn. Learning never ends.
Now, in addition to the podcast, because you were talking about learning, and that kind of takes us right into that next conversation, which is the courses. So in addition to the podcast, you're offering courses. So talk about those. What goes into these courses, and what can people expect if they were to enroll?
So there's a number of courses. So there's the course that is a certification program, so recruiters can become certified EQ specialists. So they are then able to do EQ assessments, and they're able to move forward and create maybe 100 days coaching or whatever they want to be able to do. That is a great course to be able to do. And the first one is kicking off in April in Toronto. So people from the States can fly over, and that's in April, or people in Canada or whatever. And that is a certification course specifically for recruiters and HR specialists to learn about emotional intelligence for themselves and to become certified. And that's a 2-for-1 kind of deal there. It's actually quite cool. The second course that I have is specifically a workshop course. I invite 40 people at a time, so it's a very small group. That was actually supposed to launch this month, but my son had lots of neurosurgery in November and December, so everything was put on hold, and I've just been bumping everything across. So that's probably going to launch at the end of February at the earliest. So that is that. And then there's one-to-one, and there's also group workshops within organizations. So and that is all about understanding from an emotional quotient perspective where they are, how they can develop, how they can develop their own emotional intelligence for themselves, so they are able to be more productive, focus on their performance, and create that human experience that kind of takes it to that next level, specifically for within their organization. So that's the first thing, and then they can become certified specifically, with the courses that are going to be taking place throughout the rest of the year. So there's quite a number to choose from.
Now, I mean, you actually, so let's kind of walk this back here. You've got the podcast, all right? You've got the courses.
Yeah.
And, you've got speaking engagements as well. I'm not sure when you sleep. I mean, I'm not really sure. Maybe an hour and a half here or there. But you speak as well. Let's talk about that for a second. These speaking engagements, what goes into one of these engagements, and who's the ideal audience for these engagements?
Ooh, it depends. So, for example, last year I did Recruiter Trends Conference in West Palm Beach, and there I talked about emotional intelligence for recruiters and how important it is, and and tips on each of the areas and how they can develop. That was a lot of fun. That was cramming a lot into 1 hour, I have to say. It was like cramming a 2-day course into 1 hour, which was a blast. But it was to give everybody a really good insight as to just how deep it can go. And if people took something away, fantastic. And I believe it went quite well. And I'm also at ERE in San Diego, and there it's having a conversation with a doctor in industrial psychology, specifically about how recruiters can evolve, what they can learn, how they can adapt, what the end goals are, and things like that, which is going to be fun on stage as well. So lots of different things. And what goes into it? I mean, I live and breathe all of this. So it's not like reinventing, or not reinventing, but inventing something that's new. I've had a really long and passionate relationship with my big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to help recruiters evolve, because I know that when recruiters can evolve, they're able to, completely change the perception that we know is out there, and we don't want that. We're human beings too, and we want to help the world and our companies and our clients do what they need to do. That's why we're doing it. I want a complete rebrand.
So again, just a lot of great information. I always like people to have a little nugget, if you will, a little tidbit that they can take away. All right. So if you're a recruiter out there, if you're a candidate out there, if you're a client out there, and maybe it's different for all three, or it could be the same for all three. What's one bit of emotional intelligence that you can latch onto? What's one tip to help enhance that type of atmosphere, if you will?
There is one tip, and this is universal. This is an emotional intelligence universal point, and it's the most important point. But first of all, I'm going to tell you a little story. When
I love story time.
I know, it's story time. So when I was young, back in my 20s.
So yesterday. Right?
You're so sweet. You're so kind. Can I come back? So when I was in my 20s, I did not associate the body and the brain and the mind and my health. As far as I was concerned, they were all completely disconnected. And I was just so ambitious. I think I was verging on anorexia because all I did was smoke cigarettes and drink hot chocolate and, drink Jack Daniels at night and work 18-hour days and on weekends. I mean, it was, as far as I was concerned, I just was this huge, horrible workaholic. And I was constantly ill, and I couldn't work out why I was constantly ill. But that's besides the point. I would get stressed up. The reason why I was working those ridiculous hours is because I was so stressed. Had somebody taught me about meditation back in the 90s, which would have just been so hippy-dippy and, nobody would have believed it. There would have been, completely off the charts. But there's a nice way of there's different layers. You've got the hardcore meditation, which I do recommend, but I'm not suggesting people walk away and start learning how to meditate unless they want to get an app called Mindfulness, which is by these great guys in Denmark. And it's 5 minutes. You just plug in your earphones and boom, you come out going, wow, I feel so refreshed. That's amazing. And it really works. So there's that. But then you to go up a level, which is mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And mindfulness is about being able to work out in the moment. And this takes some serious practice. And, I have to practice it all the time, which is to, you might suddenly notice that you've stopped breathing. You're breathing shallowly or whatever, and you're not breathing, and you're not getting the oxygen to your head, and you're stressed out about something, and all of a sudden, you're creating this wrong environment. You're creating the wrong environment for your brain to operate and to function productively. So I think the one thing I would really like everybody to do is to be mindful of where they're at emotionally. You might want to typically go off into a flying rage because something didn't happen, or a client said something, or a candidate said something, or your partner said something, or your son's teacher said something. Think about just sitting down, and rather than going off into that rage or sulk or going into yourself and maybe wanting to lick your wounds or whatever your normal typical response is, take that beat and go, what just happened there in your mind, and just take that moment, because that is the beginning of emotional intelligence. If you're able to just go, okay, where am I emotionally? Why am I not wanting to approach this subject? Why am I not wanting to contact that candidate? What is it that is upsetting me about this client? What is it that is really, just getting on my nerves about my partner? All of those different things that happen every single day. And it's about being able to just take that beat and going, okay, so what's the solution here? That takes a lot of work. It's really hard. But the first step is to be able to just stop and take that beat and think about it.
Evaluate where you are emotionally.
Yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. I will say this is probably one of the deeper conversations we've had. People are taking notes. Their hands are probably falling off at the point. So I think it's a great conversation. I really do. Thank goodness people can go back and play it back and retake notes again. I know I will be doing that as well. If people want to get a hold of you, questions, want to book you for speaking engagement, want to learn more about the course, how can they reach you?
They can reach me at on LinkedIn, or they can go and email me at caroline@theforward.co, or they can go to the eirecruiter.com, and there they can actually download 70 tips for recruiters, emotional intelligence for recruiters, and there's just stuff there, and that's kind of where my emotional intelligence for recruiters sits.
Terrific information. Trust me, if you haven't had a chance to go to her website, it is chock full of a bunch of just really useful tips, and it navigates very, very well. What we'll do, we're going to put a link both to your website as well as to your LinkedIn profile on our website, yourhotelrecruiter.com. What you'll do is you want to go to the podcast page. You'll see all the podcasts we have, and you can click on the link there. Caroline, again, terrific conversation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure. It's been a wonderful interview. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too.